Hi, I'm Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and welcome to the third in our five-part series as we help the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore celebrate its 100th birthday. And now, as usual, I'm going to be joined by Beth Goldsmith, the chair of the Associated's board. But before turning it over to her, I'd just like to get us going a little bit about today's topic, which is how the Associated and its partners have helped in times of need over the last 100 years. We're here in front of the Meyerberg Center, and here they're carrying on that mission. They've got programs for older folks, from art classes to fitness training. They've got social workers here who go and check on people who may need a little bit of help now and then. So really continuing on in that mission. But let's start our journey a little bit earlier, and I'd like to read a short quote from a booklet from 1926 when the Associated was just a few years old. And this is what it had to say. It said, "The man of character who is in need does not want something given to him. He wants an opportunity. He wants to earn his bread and, if assisted, to repay his benefactor." And I think that that's been kind of a motto for the Associated over the last 100 years of not just providing the basic human services, but trying to uplift the human spirit at the same time. Let's start, though, really now 150 years ago in 1844 when a group called the Hebrew Benevolent Society got going. This was at a time when Baltimore was experiencing one of its first bigger waves of Jewish immigration into the city. And some of those folks were well off, but some of those folks needed a helping hand. And the Hebrew Benevolent Society came to their need. At first, it provided small bits of cash assistance for new arrivals to help get them going. But critically, it also provided spiritual comfort and essentially what amounted to social work as well to help them adjust to their new home. Fast forwarding a little bit, during the Great Depression, the Associated and its partners also provided basic human assistance of food and shelter. But a group called the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society offered not only navigation for new citizens, but also spiritual help, again, helping people get adjusted to their new home. During the Depression, a gentleman named Harry Greenstein, who was chair of a group called the Jewish Social Services Bureau, he was talking to a crowd at the Hippodrome Theater, and here's what he had to say. Again, 1931. 77% of the people who came to the Jewish Social Services Bureau last year had never asked for help before. They had gone as far as they could, stretching their resources over unbelievable periods, and even now, in their extremity, they do not ask for charity, but for jobs. So that was part of the community that they were working in at the time. The Associateds helped in myriad ways and over myriad crises. In 1968, in the aftermath of the riots following the assassination of Martin Luther King, the Associated stepped in with help for businesses that had been destroyed. In 1972, after Hurricane Agnes, the Associated stepped back in to help families with housing whose homes had been destroyed. And in 2008, during the Great Recession, the Associated stepped in with a newly formed Jewish Community Services to help folks who had lost their jobs, including with career counseling. And even more recently, last year during the COVID crisis, again, the Associated and its partners had stepped in to try to help those whose jobs have been at risk or gone. All right, I'm going to stop there, though, and let's turn it over to Beth and say, Beth, carry us forward. We're all yours.
Thank you, Johns. I'd like to focus on one area that the Associated has historically had a big impact on, and that is in helping children. Let me start with the Baltimore Hebrew Orphan Asylum, founded in 1873. It was established to care for children in need, both those who had lost parents and those whose parents were alive but unable to support them. William S. Rayner, one of the chief leaders in starting the asylum, has a wonderful quote from the ribbon-cutting ceremony. He reminded the audience that the Jewish community should regard donations to the asylum as an investment that would bear fruit for some of the children in the future, and the rest would serve as the contributors' advocates in heaven. The asylum not only housed and fed children, it aspired to lofty goals with rigorous classes, physical exercise, and even dance and music lessons. In the 1920s, the orphanage moved to Levendale, near Sinai Hospital. I'm sure many people know it now as housing for seniors, but it started as a new orphanage for children called the Jewish Children's Society. Levendale did not operate long as an orphanage, however, and that's because here in Baltimore, we became the first Jewish community in the country to move away from orphanages and into foster care. Levendale became not a place for permanent housing, but a stopover point while the Children's Society could find foster parents for them or secure financial assistance for their biological parents to afford to keep them at home. In keeping with our theme of today's video of addressing more than basic survival, the Associated's work with children not only adapted as ideas of welfare changed, but in fact was on the leading edge, pushing for progressive changes that would help children even more. In this vein, the Associated and its sister organizations have for years provided education and recreational activities for children. During the Depression, one great organization doing this was the Jewish Educational Alliance, and in particular, the center it ran in East Baltimore for Jewish youth. At a time when poverty was widespread, one youth leader commented that the center provided children with hope and opportunities and kept them from becoming demoralized and getting into trouble. Another long-standing program of the Associated's that has had an enormous impact on the well-being of children is the Jewish Big Brother and Big Sister League. This was organized 100 years ago in 1920 as one of the founding agencies under the Associated umbrella. The group matches older volunteers with youth who are at risk and gives them the tools and the space to form a bond. It has helped hundreds of children develop into wonderful adults, many of whom actually became big brothers and big sisters themselves. I'll end by saying that today the Associated is, of course, continuing our commitment to Jewish children with programs like Maryland's SNAP, which helps parents navigate the school process for their children with learning differences, as well as programs that support children with learning differences in schools. We started this work over 100 years ago and are still going strong.
All right, thanks, Beth. We are going to jump from kids to older adults. No middle-aged folks in this video today. And I want to start by sharing the story of a gentleman named Isaac Goldman. Mr. Goldman was living at a place called the Hebrew Friendly Inn and Aged Home. And if that is not a fantastic name, I don't know what is. And he participated in 1923 in one of their annual centenarian balls, which were apparently great big gay affairs. And Mr. Goldman had a wonderful time, apparently. He sang the night away, and despite his blindness, he danced the night away, maybe with younger partners, but he apparently danced the waltz, the polka, and something called the turkey trot. And I wanted to share that small story with you to say that the Associated, from the very earliest days, was providing not just the basic needs, but also helping people create and become part of their own communities. Let's fast forward to the 1960s. The Associated looked around the Jewish community of Baltimore and realized that things were changing. And they commissioned a pretty extensive study to try to figure out what was going on. And they found a number of things. One was that the Jewish community was aging. And two, that they identified 2,200 people who had serious disabilities. And of those, only 200 were getting the attention and assistance that they needed. So the Associated realized it needed to make some changes. And it did that in a number of ways. One was at Levendale, the home for older folks. And this is pretty neat. It started what is credited as the first adult daycare center in the country, complete with transportation to help folks who are living at home get there and become part of this community. They also funded caseworkers to go check on folks who maybe occasionally needed a little bit of assistance. And they started new programs at Jewish Community Services, specifically targeting older adults. And finally, they created a new house, Concord House next to Levendale, run by a relatively new group then called Comprehensive Housing Assistance Inc., or CHI. CHI today runs Concord House as well as 16 other complexes, housing complexes for older folks. Really an extensive network here in Baltimore. Finally, just want to wrap up with something that just started this year, which is a new program called Age Well Baltimore that the Associated and its partners, CHI and Social Jewish Community Services, as well as a group called Chana started. And that's to help older folks as they age stay healthy. All right, I'm going to wrap up by saying I don't know whether there are still centenarian balls, but I am pretty sure that the folks, today's Isaac Goldmans, who are in one of the housing complexes or participate in some of the communities that the Associated's created, are just as thankful, not just for the help they get with housing, but for the communities that they're able to be part of. All right, I'm going to say thanks so much, but I hope that you can join us. We've got 2 more videos to go, and Beth and I are going to explore the role of women in philanthropy over the last 100 years and how philanthropic causes have addressed social justice and inequities over that same 100-year period. All right, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.